This isn't the first time that I've participated in the conference, and thank you again to the organisers for inviting me. I sort of looked at the title and I thought to myself, okay, why does Nikolai want me to talk at this one? Because my sort of sphere of expertise is slightly different to sovereignty. And it bugs me a little bit because I'm Welsh and we're from the UK, we're devolved, so we are almost independent, almost. We might get there in the end. But then Nikolai said to me to talk a little bit about the EU, the OSCE, security, and then I looked at the slide. And I thought to myself, well, when one looks at the way things have developed over the last quite a few years now, one can actually interlink a lot of things. And I think Stefan and the ambassador have interlinked some of them very, very well. Because we talked about Europe and the impact of Europe on sovereignty. And I would argue that when it started out, there wasn't much of an impact because it was purely an economic and trade organization and therefore didn't really impact upon countries' sovereignty too much. Then, obviously, as it transformed, it became more of a politicized institution, and maybe that did impact, or there was a perception of the impact on sovereignty. And I think that was more of a perception on the impact of what was appropriately described as the external sovereignty rather than the internal sovereignty. Now we're in a different context, definitively since 2014, but without question since 2022, where the EU is transforming potentially into a security organization or security-oriented organization on top of the political and the economic, which ties them all together. And that may well have an impact on sovereignty in many ways, a different impact. Because when one talks about security, and this brings in the OSCE for me very nicely, as technically the largest security organization in the world, 57 participating states, well, one's sort of on the sideline at the moment, but understandably so. But then you look at, okay, we've got 57 participating states there, we've got 30 plus in NATO, we've got 20 plus in the EU, which one goes where and how does it work? But it's comparative security. You know, I believe that the future of European security is going to be founded on political and economic basis. The OSCE is more of a cooperative security. Will that exist in the future? That's something that potentially is under debate. NATO is collective security. But I've got some arguments against sort of each of those, if you will, in terms of not just the impact on sovereignty, but the impact. If you have this European security architecture, and everybody's talking about it now, people have been talking about it for a long time, actually, and I'm sure the ambassador and Stefan, we're of the same generation, dare I say, remember the concept of the European Defence Force. It's somewhere on a bit of paper, in a drawer, in a desk. It's never really materialized. So what will that future be? Will it be politically based? Will it be an addendum to one of the other organizations? Will something disappear to make a space for this new European security architecture? Because at the end of the day, when you contribute to security, whether it's cooperative, collective, or anew, it's going to cost you money. There are going to be standards, there are going to be rules, like there are with EU accession. You know, the fulfillment of the chapters of the acquis is not a negotiation process. It's a set of rules that you have to adhere to. Membership of NATO, technically, is not a negotiation process. It's a commitment to 2.5% of your GDP annually spent in support. The OSCE, well, the word organization is a fallacy. It was renamed, it's still a conference, which means it's a collective group that have agreed. There is no legal basis for the OSCE, and therefore the contributions that come in from the participating states come in some years, not others, but it's not there to form real security in terms of physical security. It's there to prevent by this cooperative security. Will that exist? Because people now are looking at their own sovereignty, their own positions, their own internal, external sovereignty, where it relates to. And I think one of the best examples with Switzerland, given by the ambassador, was the fact that they've got a strong army. For a very small nation, it's a very strong army. The same with the Austrians. For a relatively small nation, they've got a very strong army. They also have a lot of inter-cooperation. Inter-cooperation. That's not collective, that's not cooperative, that's... inter-cooperation, that's agreements. When we talk about neutrality, there are lots of different sorts of neutrality, and the ambassador mentioned legal neutrality. I would argue that now, neutrality is under debate. I would say that the foundations for Switzerland and Austria of legal neutrality and the remainder, and this international stamp, are gone. For Austria and Switzerland now, it's an acceptance, as it was arguably for Finland. Sweden's always been between and betwixt, but Finland more. It's been an acceptance of their status neutral, an international acceptance. That could apply to Moldova. The example of a strong army could apply to Moldova. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of a collective or a cooperative security alliance or a European alliance, because part of your sovereignty is making that decision. Are we going to join that? We can be part of that because it's not going to impact on us too much. NATO, that's 2%, 2.5% of GDP. We can't afford that. Okay, let's not be a member. Let's continue as we are. Moldova's been in the Partnership for Peace program, the international IPAPs, for a long time, and it's benefiting Moldova, and it can continue to benefit Moldova. Why change it if it's a positive? If it's a bike that's working, you don't need to change the tires. So, does it need to go there? EU, great economic security, potentially. That's under question at the moment. Giving away your sovereignty. Okay, anyone read the news today? That little country that's a member of the European Union, the Federal Republic of Germany, has just installed border control on all its borders because of potential terrorist attacks and incidents that have taken place. So it's exerting its sovereignty within the European Union. So is sovereignty really given away, or is it sort of hung on a peg? You know, as some people say when we have these questions, I said, we'll put that one in the parking lot for now. Sovereignty's in the parking lot. When we want it, we'll bring it out. And if we want to, we can utilize it. So I think there's a lot to talk about in terms of security and sovereignty that interlinks economies. It's a debate that needs to be had. It's a debate that is going to go on. It's part of joining and being part of these unions, the EU, the OBSE, NATO, or even bilateral or trilateral agreements. These negotiations and the status of sovereignty and who exerts what and the influence all need to be talked through. And at the end of the day, arguably, Moldova needs to find its own place. And that place, according to the Constitution, within many of these things, is going to be decided either by referendum or by majority vote. I'll stop there.